Ohio State wide receiver Chris Olave sure sounds like he wants to be a New Orleans Saint, but how good of a fit is he in the New Orleans Saints system? We'll break that down and get you ready for wide receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks as the NFL Combine test and drills kick off this evening. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, USA Today's Saints Wire, Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Had a wonderful time getting to visit with coaches and GMs during the Combine and being around for wide receivers and quarterbacks. We're going to start off with a wide receiver today, wide receiver out of Ohio State, the Buckeye, Chris Olave. Chris Olave told me during his media availability that he would love to be a New Orleans Saint, and I think that New Orleans Saints fans would absolutely love to see him in the black and gold, lined up opposite Michael Thomas, who's been a little bit of a mentor to Chris Olave. So here's what Chris had to say when I asked about his relationship with Michael Thomas, and then I followed up about whether or not he has had any time so far in Indianapolis with the New Orleans Saints.
I talked to Mike Thomas a couple times, called him a couple times. He gave me a lot of advice. He's a great role model to me, one of the best receivers in the game for previous years and years to come. So just to be able to communicate with him, and he's an Ohio State legend. So just to be able to, like I said, communicate with him and send texts back and forth and see from his perspective what they expect, and just to be able to use him as a guy to lean on. I feel like it's huge. So
it's great. And have you met with the Saints this week so far?
Yes, sir. I met with the Saints on Monday also. It was a great meeting. Love to be there. New Orleans is a good city. I played in New Orleans one time against Clemson, and ended up being good. So it'll be a great organization, like I said. And Mike Thomas is there. They got a lot of Buckeyes there, and I love to keep that Buckeye pipeline.
So lots of great things to take away there. You could see a smile overtake his face as he started to say that he would actually love to play in the city of New Orleans. Of course, the last time that he appeared in New Orleans worked out really well for him and the Ohio State Buckeyes. So he wouldn't be mad about reprising that type of opportunity there. But you could hear a little bit about the relationship between he and former Ohio State Buckeye, now New Orleans Saint Michael Thomas. And again, just as a reminder, we know that Michael Thomas will be back in New Orleans in 2022. We sort of heard all that during the Senior Bowl and the Super Bowl, but here just a weekend ago, the New Orleans Saints did restructuring his contract, which effectively keeps him locked in for 2022 and probably 2023 as well, as they'll likely restructure that money and push that down further down the road as well. So you look at what it is that the New Orleans Saints would be able to put together on the field there with Chris Olave opposite Michael Thomas, and there's no mystery around why that would be appealing. And you hear Chris Olave talking a bit about texting with Michael Thomas, talking with Michael Thomas, being in constant communication with him, sort of calling him a role model in terms of the way that he, is one of the best wide receivers in the game and has been one of the best wide receivers in the game. And I think that a person like Chris Olave complements a guy like Michael Thomas so extremely well that, of course, there's going to be some synergy there, some interest there. And then you could hear at the end him talk a little bit about the Ohio State to New Orleans Saints pipeline. So there you go. It's not just the New Orleans Saints fans and media that talk about the pipeline. The Ohio State Buckeyes know about it as well. The New Orleans Saints know about it as well. Obviously, if you're an Ohio State Buckeye and you're coming out of, the college program there, you're ready to go into the NFL draft, and you can look at a team and say, okay, I've got, alums that are there. There are alums that are a part of the coaching staff there or have been a part of the coaching staff there. There are, teammates of mine, former potential roommates of mine, for all we know. Like, there's a relationship, there's friends, there are people there. Then obviously there's going to be a bit of a draw for the prospect. Now, the prospect doesn't get to choose where they go, right? The teams have to draft them. But when you look at the New Orleans Saints track record and you look at the needs on the team, wide receiver and potentially one in the first round, which, by the way, an Ohio State Buckeye has not been taken in the first round of the NFL draft since 2007. It's actually 2 receivers taken in the first round there, one of which was Ted Ginn Jr., who would later on in his career end up being a New Orleans Saint. Now, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, either one of those guys has the opportunity to become the first wide receiver drafted or the first pair of wide receivers drafted in the first round for the Ohio State Buckeyes in 15 years, while also becoming a New Orleans Saint, because New Orleans Saints will pick at 18, and it seems likely that one of these 2 guys will be on the board. Now, Chris Olave did predict big-time numbers coming from Garrett Wilson, so maybe that ends up skyrocketing Garrett Wilson's value a little bit, and he ends up getting taken a little bit earlier, but all the better for the New Orleans Saints if they have the same type of interest in Chris Olave that Olave seems to have in the New Orleans Saints. The team has already met with him. Remember, every prospect meets with every team. So it's not interesting that he met with the team. What's interesting is hearing about the experience and hearing about his connection with Michael Thomas, right? And the other Ohio State Buckeyes that are on the team. Remember, the Saints just pulled Pete Werner last year from that same team. So there's already certainly a more, let's say, recent connection between Chris Olave and a current Buckeye that's on the team. There's currently 6 on the team right now for the New Orleans Saints. So you can see all of the cohesion, right? You can see all the synergy there. We know how much the Saints care about cohesion. They care about familiarity. The Ohio State Buckeyes program is a football program that they obviously like very much on the offensive and defensive sides, and that they believe that they're familiar with, and that they believe that prepares those students, those student athletes to translate to the NFL the same way that the New Orleans Saints want a prospect to translate to their system. So the synergy is there, the continuity, the familiarity, all the things that have been the focus so far for the New Orleans Saints this offseason, it all lines up. So let's talk a little bit more about Chris Olave. Let's break it down. Everything sounds familiar, everything sounds convenient, but is he actually a good fit for the New Orleans Saints, their system, and what they need? We'll answer all 3 of those questions as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But before we get to that, I'm excited to tell you about our friends over at betonline.net, the #1 place for all of your sports betting needs. And of course, the official online gambling partner for the Locked On Podcast Network. How would you like some NFL Combine props? Yeah, they've got them. You want to bet on Rich Eisen's over-under on his 40-yard dash, 6.03 seconds? I'm going to take the over, Rich. Sorry, buddy. You could also bet on whether or not some of these big records are going to be broken. John Ross, who set the record for the 40-yard dash at 4.22. There's some talk that Tariq Woolen, the cornerback out of UTSA, is going to run potentially 4.2 flat in some of his training, potentially could bring that into the Combine as well. That would be a brand new record. You can bet yes or no on that. You can bet whether or not Stephen Paez's 49 bench reps are going to be topped as well. I'm going to take a no on that one, but lots of different stuff for you to check out. Even if you're not looking for football, there's basketball, hockey, MMA, UFC, boxing, your favorite Vegas casino games. There's so much stuff over at betonline.net. So go and check them out. It's your #1 place for all the sports betting news, podcasts, and analysis that you need. And make sure you continue to check out the website so that you can see all of those great offers that pop up all the time. It's betonline.net, where the game starts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks as always for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're 5 days a week here with you all throughout the remainder of the off season, not going anywhere. Schedule is not changing. We got a ton coming out for you all throughout the off season. And of course, it's Combine week later on today. First day of drills, quarterbacks, tight ends, and wideouts as well, getting their workouts going. So we'll get a look at some of them. We'll talk about and preview some of those prospects to keep an eye out on here in a little bit. But right now, I want to continue to focus on Chris Olave and talking about whether or not he is a perfect fit for the New Orleans Saints. And my answer is simple. My answer is yes, if the New Orleans Saints want to continue a downfield attack in their offense. There is a little bit of a caveat to it, but if that's the MO for the New Orleans Saints, if they want to continue to pick up what they started to build in the first 7 games of last year and then try to continue on with Trevor Siemian last year, then yes, Chris Olave is a perfect fit for you. Now let's talk about why. The reason why I caveat it, let's start there, is that he's a good fit for the New Orleans Saints, which remember is our first category here, because if the Saints want to continue to stretch down the field, then that's great. Chris Olave is somebody that will allow you to do that. But if you're going to move forward with a quarterback like Teddy Bridgewater or a Derek Carr type, don't forget Las Vegas Raiders head coach Josh McDaniels telling everyone at Radio Row yesterday that Derek Carr is a starter for the Las Vegas Raiders week 1, so he's not going to be a tradable option more than likely. in that case. But if they went for somebody like that liked to operate within the yard markers, right, then all of a sudden Chris Olave maybe isn't your best option. And instead you want somebody that has some yards after catch ability, like a Wan'Dale Robinson. And I know Deonte Harty has a similar skill set, but first of all, Deonte Harty is still technically a free agent. He's a restricted free agent, so he should be back in 2022. And even still, there's nothing wrong with having redundant qualities and redundant skills on your wide receiver class. That's not a problem at all. And so if you have those yards after catch demons, right, those guys that can create after the catch, then that's great for, the Teddy Bridgewaters, the Derek Carrs of the world. But if you're moving forward with, a more dynamic quarterback, a more playmaking quarterback, a quarterback that wants to go downfield, and a quarterback that you're comfortable going downfield with, and yes, that is a little bit describing Jameis Winston, but there are other options as well, like a Tyler Huntley, for instance. There are these opportunities for a guy like Chris Olave to be an absolute perfect fit. If you look at his heat chart, which is provided over at Pro Football Focus in their draft guide, you can see that he operates below average within 8 yards, but above average 8 yards all the way down the field to 45, 50 yards, right? So he is a field stretcher. And I know 9, 10 yards down the field, that's not field stretching, Ross. I understand. But a lot of his game was operating beyond the first down markers, which is something that I think Saints fans will probably find refreshing to hear, right? Is that you have that receiver that you continue to target beyond the 10-yard line instead of having to go for the 3 yards, 5 yards, 6 yards here and there, along with a Michael Thomas that can get you 8 to 10 yards, 8 to 13 yards on just about any play that you need him to. So that's the part that I think maybe is a little bit of a caveat, but he is a good fit as long as the New Orleans Saints want to continue to do what it is that they were doing or starting to do in the first few games of the 2021 season. If Pete Carmichael wants to open it up, Chris Olave, fantastic deep field threat. Now let's talk about why he is such a good deep field threat and how that fits in with the room. Because if you think about the things that New Orleans Saints struggled with last year, the two things at wide receiver, or really at pass catcher as a whole, were drops and separation. Drops being a big one. You look at guys like Kenny Stills and Kevin White, these sort of last-ditch efforts that the Saints put out there to try to get some fresh, blood into the wide receiver room that didn't necessarily work out. Although Kevin White is back with the New Orleans Saints, he'll be back at least for training camp. But the Saints across all the pass-catching roles, tight end and wide receiver, and even in a couple of instances running back, with the exception of Alvin Kamara, you saw drops, separation being an issue. Chris Olave, 4.9% drop rate over his career. That's not bad. That's exactly what you want. He's a sure-handed guy, and it's one of the ways that he wins in addition to his route running. And the reason why I highlight the route running is because that second point, New Orleans Saints receivers, pass catchers, not creating a lot of separation last year. We tracked it all throughout the season. 2 yards here and there in a couple of games. Maybe you got one game where somebody got up to 3 or 4 yards, but that was really it. And then you had, the one, anomaly games or so every now and then to where you got up to the 5+ yard separation mark for some of these pass catchers. But for the most part, consistently, the Saints struggled to create separation with their pass catchers. Chris Olave, a fantastic separator, particularly downfield. So the combination of those two things goes to both points. If the Saints want to continue to stretch the field, Chris Olave. If the Saints need help with separation, Chris Olave, as long as you're putting him downfield or giving him some of those I'm going to run away from you type routes, right? The post routes, the long crossers over the middle, even drag routes at some point. It's not something he did a lot at Ohio State. Doesn't mean that he can't do them, right? But he's also got the fly routes, all these things that he can put down to where he can create this separation with his route running sort of specificity, right? He's very specific. He's a very technical route runner. He's a very successful route runner, one of the best route runners in this class. It gives you the opportunity to be able to create a little bit of that separation and then extend it as you push downfield. And so I think that that's another reason that Chris Olave becomes a perfect fit for the New Orleans Saints if that's their MO. You look at the rest of the receiver core around Chris Olave, and he would be a great complement to the way that you can move pieces around. You have him opposite Michael Thomas. That's already a really nice combination. Juwan Johnson, tight end, converted from wide receiver last year. He's back. He was re-signed earlier this morning as an exclusive rights free agent, $895,000. Bam, he's in New Orleans in 2022, no questions asked. So we'll see if he's able to get through training camp and everything, but you expect that he should. He's somebody that ends up being a seam stretcher for you in the middle of guys like Michael Thomas and your field stretcher on the opposite side in Chris Olave, who's probably going to be your quintessential Z receiver, right? We were looking at Emir Smith-Marset last year in the 5th, 6th, 7th round as a potential guy to come in and serve that role for the Saints. No longer, right? Now you're looking at a number one wide receiver on some people's boards. Pro Football Focus has him as the fourth receiver. I believe NFL.com has him as the third receiver. I mean, Chris Olave is somebody that's going to garner a lot of attention, and he could potentially garner more attention this evening at the Combine. So we'll certainly be watching out for him. But it doesn't stop there. It's not just the dynamic of having him paired across from Michael Thomas. Think about what else you could do. Who else can you get involved there? You have Michael Thomas and Chris Olave on the outside. If you run, let's say, Nick Van Ed, or maybe a new tight end, or maybe an improved Adam Troutman or a Jawan Johnson at Y, and then you end up having some slot receiver like a Deonte Harty or a Marquez Callaway playing the big slot role. Lil Jordan Humphrey playing the big slot role showed you he can do that. Then all of a sudden you have a lot of different ways to attack in the short and intermediate areas, but then also you have a way to stretch the field with your tight end and with your Z receiver. Or you have somebody like Deonte Harty lined up on the outside if you can retain him, which again seems likely. Chris Olave opposite him, and then you put Michael Thomas in the slot, and then you're able to operate him there. The Saints love working him from the slot. So those are the types of things that a dynamic piece like Chris Olave gives you. It's not just about having one dynamic piece. It's about having a dynamic attack. It's one of the things that made the Saints special 2006 through 2019, I guess you can say, 2020. That's what made them special, was having a dynamic attack, and adding a piece like Chris Olave plus maybe somebody else in free agency, or you win big by keeping Deonte Harty in the building, anything like that. And then you get a piece like Chris Olave. There's no wonder why he's a perfect fit if your MO is to continue to stretch the field in 2022. So we know we're going to be watching Chris Olave at the Combine, but what other wide receivers should you keep an eye out on for your New Orleans Saints? Will Treylon Burks light it up like we expect? Will Malik Willis put on a show in the position drills? And will he test in the testing drills? We'll get to all of that and more as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Let's get it, Houdat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day, every day. Wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, they're all getting started with their combine drills this evening. Position drills as well as the testing drills like 40, vertical, broad jump, 3-cone, all that stuff. So let's talk about what it is that you should be watching for, and I'll give you a couple of names. Keep an eye out on at all three of these positions. Now, the names that I'm going to give you are about looking at like first-round talent, second-day talent, third-day talent, as opposed to trying to list off a whole bunch of people, right? There's a whole bunch of players that you should be interested in for sure. So if I don't name somebody, it's not because I don't think you should watch out for them. It's just that, hey, I try to keep this structured. So let's start off. We've been talking wide receivers. We've been talking about Chris Olave. Let's talk about some of the other wide receivers that should be on your radar. And we have to start off with the guy that might be the first wide receiver off the board. But if not, the New Orleans Saints should be interested in either at 18 or trading up. And that would be Treylon Burks, the wide receiver out of Arkansas. Weighed in today, absolutely massive. 6'2", 225 pounds. Came in with 9 7/8 inch hands, nearly 10-inch hands. He is basically the guy that everyone's going to fall in love with. Remember, the mold this offseason is going to be, who's the next Deebo Samuel? That's going to be the big thing. Treylon Burks is like the bigger Deebo Samuel, right? He's a little more Deebo than he is Samuel. Let's just say it that way. So Treylon Burks definitely one to keep an eye out on. You're going to want to see what he runs because he's at that size. And if he's able to put up, a 4.3, 4.4, which is sort of being teased that he might be in the high 4.3s, like a 4.38, 4.39, then all of a sudden that's DK Metcalf status of testing and size, height, weight, speed is a big sort of buzz phrase you're going to hear a lot, and you'll certainly hear it about Chris Olave. You won't hear about Chris Olave, actually. You're probably going to hear that Chris Olave is too light, but you'll hear it about Treylon Burks for sure. The next player that I want to highlight is going to be somebody that you can look at in the second day. I mentioned him earlier, Wandel Robinson. This wide receiver class is super, super deep. There's a lot of great wide receivers that you can find throughout. So actually, I'm going to highlight two potential day two guys. Wandel Robinson out of Kentucky, but then also George Pickens out of Georgia. Wandel Robinson is going to weigh in pretty light and also pretty short, but he's somebody that's going to be extremely dynamic. He's going to test well and all that. So those numbers are going to be a big thing. Think maybe a little Deonte Harty in a way, but then a little bit more of an experienced pass catcher and wide receiver as a converted running back. And then I want to highlight George Pickens because George Pickens is going to be another one of those height, weight, speed guys. We spoke to him. I spoke to him yesterday, actually, at the Combine. 6'3", around 200 pounds. He's going to be somebody that he says he can run in the 4.3, 4.4 area. So if he does that, especially coming off of his injury where he says he's now 100% and he's diving fully into the NFL Combine, that's going to be huge for him. So definitely somebody to watch out for, because George Pickens is somebody that kind of fell off, right? He was a top wide receiver prospect, but then he got injured. And because of that, he's kind of fallen off of the radar a little bit. He can put himself back on the radar this evening with some nice runs and a good vert. He is going to wait to do the broad jump until his pro day, however. And then just to circle back to Chris Olave plans to do everything he told us at the combine except for bench press. So just keep that in mind. And then one other wide receiver that I want to highlight is Texas Tech's Eric Ezukonma. He is 6'2", 209 pounds, according to the the NFL database. 33 1.5-inch arms, 9.3/8 hands. So it could be a little bit bigger in the hands way, but he's got, he's a great catcher. He is somebody that is great in 50-50 balls. He's got good ball skills. He's got good speed, especially for his size. So you'll want to see him put that on display as well. All right, let's jump to quarterbacks, because obviously that is the position that continues to gather more and more, let's just say, attention and warrant more attention over the course of this week, while we're hearing all these veteran quarterbacks no longer being available or sounding like they're no longer available. We'll highlight that more tomorrow. But obviously, you're going to want to keep an eye out for Kenny Pickett. He got his hand measured finally, 8.5-inch hands. That's pretty small. So if that's really his hand size and it's not some unofficial measurement or something like that, that's going to turn a lot of teams off, because look, there's a difference between like the kind of small hand conversation and 8.5-inch hands for an NFL quarterback. That's really, really small. I'm going to grab Joe Burrow's hand size real quick, because Joe Burrow's hand size became, of course, a big point of contention. And unfortunately, now it looks like you've got a guy like Kenny Pickett, who might have come in with actually smaller hands than Joe Burrow, because Joe Burrow's hands came in at 9 inches. So half an inch bigger. So with that being the case, Kenny Pickett is going to continue to draw criticism about that hand size, and he's going to be under a microscope. So I think position drills are going to be the most important to watch there. Matt Corral not doing much, but he did weigh in, and he came in at nice height and weight, 6'1", 212 pounds. Great to see that. I thought he was going to come in potentially at sub 200, which would have tanked him quite a bit. Malik Willis is not running any drills. He's not going to run the 40, not going to do the vert, anything like that, but he is going to throw. So you're going to want to see him during the position drills. He is somebody that has continued to steal the hearts of everybody that talks to him. He talked about his football intelligence. He talked about his ability to retain information, impressing NFL teams. So definitely something to make sure that you're clocking when you actually get to see him on the field. A later round quarterback that's just going to be worth watching, maybe not necessarily for the quarterback position at all, is De'Aaron King, former quarterback out of Miami. He said he's trying to show everybody that he can do whatever it takes to help a team win at quarterback, wide receiver, running back. He's kind of taking the Taysom Hill and Ladarius Skelton route, to where he's trying to make sure that he's showing you, hey, whatever you need me to do, I can do. And that's great for a guy like him. It's just, is it going to work with his size? All of that. So it'll just be fun to kind of watch his testing drills, his 40, his broad, stuff like that, to see his explosiveness as well as his speed. And then I got to shout out the local prospect, Southeastern Louisiana's Cole Kelly from Lafayette, Louisiana. Shout out Lafayette, Louisiana family. It took me in after Katrina. They lived in Lafayette, so shout out to you. Great city. 6'7", 249 pounds. This guy is a quarterback. I mean, he is built like a quarterback, but built like a tight end. He's kind of one of those like Brock Osweiler types, just in terms of height, size, all that other stuff. But I think he's a better passer than Brock Osweiler was. So he'll be another one to watch during position drills, things like that. All right, and we'll wrap up with tight end. We'll go through this one quickly, because I'm going to give you just 3 names basically here. You're going to want to look for Colorado State's Trey McBride, Ohio State's Jeremy Ruckert, and you're going to want to take a look at Wisconsin's Jake Ferguson. All 3 of those tight ends have the ability to stretch fields. They're good blockers. I've talked about Jeremy Ruckert and his split zone work with Ohio State. He is a Buckeye, so just something to keep in mind. And then also you have their ability to stretch the field in terms of seam routes, things like that. So they all give you sticky hands. They all give you good blocking. They all give you good mental processing. And they're all great candidates for second day, third day, probably second day, all 3 of those guys, tight ends, to keep an eye out on. So we'll talk more about how everybody tests, who stands out, and we're going to talk about the dwindling quarterback market and how it impacts the New Orleans Saints coming up in tomorrow's episodes, because things aren't looking as great as we thought in terms of the wealth of options we expected to be on the market. So what did the New Orleans Saints do now? We'll talk about that tomorrow as we continue on with another episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks as always for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, make sure you go and check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. No better time to be checking that out every single day, especially here throughout the combine. Former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker giving you the inside analysis on these prospects, and analytics expert giving you all of the data and information you need to know, Ryan Tracy, as well. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. For everything else you need in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.